President Trump is now openly calling for the federal government to take over elections in more than a dozen states. It is prefaced on this, his lie that he won the 2020 election. Listen to what he told podcaster Dan Bongino, who was his deputy FBI director until just a month ago.
The Republicans should say, we want to take over. We should take over the voting in at least 15 places. The Republicans ought to nationalize the voting.
The Constitution explicitly grants the states, not the federal government, not Republicans, the right to run their polls. This comes after the FBI searched an election office in Fulton County, Georgia last week and seized the 2020 ballots. Sources now tell CNN that the director of national intelligence, Tulsi Gabbard, who was on site during the operation, put the president on the phone with some of the FBI agents who carried out that search. Gabbard now says the president asked her to be there and that during the call, he did not ask any questions of the agents or give any orders. CNN's Elena Treen is live at the White House. Kate just spoke with one of the Fulton County commissioners there, who says every single election has been fair and free. But now you have this situation with the FBI picking up those votes, and you have the President of the United States making a really disturbing claim. What are you learning about this?
Yeah, look, in some of the conversations I've been having, Sarah, of course, you know, what the president is saying, particularly about this idea of nationalizing elections, is just almost certainly not going to happen. They would have to, it would require changing the Constitution, and many Republican lawmakers, of course, see the way that the election process works in the United States, and having the states be the ones who really get to decide a lot of the key parts of that is not going to change. But what this does, really, this rhetoric, is continue a trend and a pattern that we've seen the president continue into his second term in office, which is to continue and, you know, cast doubt on the integrity of the election process in the United States. And of course, Trump himself, and I know he continues to believe this, he still rages about this behind the scenes, this idea that, you know, elections in the United States can be rife with fraud. He still often talks about the 2020 election and falsely claims that he had won it. But then also this idea that perhaps there's some broader conspiracy that Democrats are engaging in to try and prop up undocumented immigrants, for example, in certain states, and that could also be affecting the election process. Again, all of that without evidence. But I think what we're seeing, what we saw happen last week in Fulton County, Georgia, is one part of this. But we've also seen the president take other steps. One is that the Justice Department is now demanding that several states, including Minnesota, turn over their voter rolls, their full voter rolls, as the Trump administration is really trying to build a national voter file. We also know the president last year had, pushed forward with these executive orders. He signed an executive order in March to make significant changes to the electoral process in the United States, including requiring documents.
President Trump just said something that sent shockwaves through Washington. Not whispered behind closed doors, not hinted at in vague political language. He said it out loud on a podcast with absolute certainty. He announced that Republicans should take over the voting in at least 15 states, that the federal government should nationalize elections, and that this move should happen immediately. Anyone who's ever opened a copy of the Constitution knows why this is jaw-dropping. Elections are run by the states, not by Washington, not by political parties, and definitely not by a single president demanding control. And yet here he was, speaking as if this nation-defining rule is something he can overwrite with a microphone and a frustrated tone. Inside Republican circles, this moment wasn't seen as just another controversial Trump quote. It was seen as a flashing red light, a sign that the cracks already forming inside the GOP were about to widen into something far more chaotic. What makes this even more intense is the timing. Just days before Trump's statement, the FBI searched an election office in Fulton County, Georgia, and seized 2020 ballots. That alone stirred up a storm of conspiracy chatter online. But inside the Republican Party, the mood isn't excitement, it's exhaustion. They're watching their leader push harder and harder against constitutional boundaries, while at the same time losing influence over his own lawmakers. Almost 30 Republicans have broken away from him on major votes in the last few months. These aren't fringe figures. These are senators and representatives with long-established reputations, some from deep red states, some who once campaigned side by side with Trump. Strategists whisper that Trump's dominance is no longer guaranteed, that the party is shifting in real time. But that wasn't the whole story, not even close. As the internal cracks deepened, the mainstream press kept pushing a narrative of normalcy. They focused on procedural votes, policy disagreements, day-to-day gridlock. But the Republican voting pattern told a very different story. One senior strategist put it bluntly in a private conversation leaked online. "We're watching the beginning of a realignment inside the GOP, and the dam is starting to break." That became undeniable when the House, on January 8th, passed a 3-year extension of Obamacare subsidies, something the party has fought tooth and nail for over a decade. Not 9 Republicans, not a handful. 17 crossed the aisle. 17 publicly broke with Trump's position. Despite his team signaling they expected full loyalty, the final vote wasn't even close. 234 to 196. This wasn't a blip, it was a political warning shot, and Republicans knew it. Fox News, Trump's longtime megaphone, ran a segment calling these 17 rebels. If Fox is willing to admit that Trump's control is slipping, that alone is historic. And quietly, Republican pollsters began to sound alarms. They were already concerned about Trump's dwindling approval among independents heading into the 2026 midterms. But now they were warning that internal fractures could cost the party the House and the Senate. These weren't Democratic predictions. They were internal GOP fears. And as we'll see, those fears were far from irrational. The Obamacare vote wasn't the first sign of rebellion. In fact, the fracture really began in the Senate. 5 Republicans, Rand Paul, Susan Collins, Lisa Murkowski, Todd Young, and Josh Hawley, broke ranks and voted to advance a resolution limiting Trump's military authority regarding Venezuela. Trump had been hinting online, in interviews, and in vague speeches that he might take action there. He implied that force might be necessary, and his tone made lawmakers uneasy. Then he saw the vote. 5 Republicans pushing back. 5 Republicans telling him, "You don't get unchecked military power." He went on social media claiming their votes weakened him as commander-in-chief. But for many constitutional conservatives, and even some MAGA voters, the message from these senators was overdue. Congress decides war powers. That's the rule. That's the design. And Trump's increasing desire for unilateral decision-making had long sparked anxiety inside the GOP, even if most lawmakers kept quiet about it. Once those 5 voted yes, something shifted inside the party. Several GOP senators told reporters off the record that they were relieved the vote happened. One even described it as proof we're not all scared. When lawmakers in Washington start talking like that, it means the fear barrier that once protected Trump's authority is cracking. And once fear fades, control follows quickly. But if Trump believed the Senate pushback was the full extent of his troubles, he was deeply mistaken. Because what happened next wasn't just defiance, it was sabotage of his long-term strategy. Trump made the stunning decision to withhold support from 3 Republican senators up for re-election in 2026. These weren't unknown figures. These were incumbents. These were people who had voted with him on major issues. But Trump decided they weren't loyal enough, not sufficiently aligned with the MAGA brand, not willing to pledge unwavering allegiance. So he refused to endorse them. Republican strategists went into panic mode. One leaked memo described the move as catastrophic, warning that losing even one of these seats could shift the Senate majority. Yet Trump didn't budge. For him, loyalty isn't a preference. It's a requirement. If you don't show it, he doesn't support you, even if the consequence is handing Democrats a Senate majority. That decision reverberated across GOP offices. Lawmakers facing re-election saw what was happening and realized that Trump's backing was no longer guaranteed. Worse, it might actually come with a political cost. In swing states, his endorsement has become a double-edged sword. It energizes the MAGA base, yes, but it also repels independents and motivates Democratic turnout. Republicans began asking themselves a dangerous question: do I need Trump, or do I need distance from him? Once that question starts circulating, it's nearly impossible to put the genie back in the bottle. And for Trump, that's where the real danger lies. The fractures aren't limited to votes or endorsements. They extend into Trump's core agenda, his budget priorities, and his tax proposals. Right now, House Republicans are split into 2 hostile blocs. On one side, the MAGA hardliners who will support Trump no matter the electoral consequences. On the other, centrists trying to survive in competitive districts who know that backing Trump's full program could destroy their chances in 2026. With the House majority so thin, losing even 4 or 5 Republicans could kill major parts of Trump's agenda. And that's exactly what's happening behind closed doors. Centrists are telling leadership they will not support certain budget measures. They will not commit political self-ODing to please Trump. These aren't threats. These are promises. And every time a Republican declares independence, others take notice. There's also something important happening beneath the surface. Republicans are becoming less afraid of Trump. For 8 years, fear has been the glue holding the GOP together. Fear of being mocked, fear of being primaried, fear of being exiled from the party. But once a few lawmakers showed they were willing to break away, a psychological shift began. people realized that rebelling wasn't instant political death. Rand Paul survived, Susan Collins survived. The 17 House Republicans who voted on Obamacare, they're being treated as pragmatists back home, not traitors. And when fear dissolves, power dynamics change faster than anyone expects. Democrats are watching this unfold with fascination. Their campaign strategists are already preparing to use GOP fractures as messaging for 2026. Republicans can't even govern themselves. How can they govern the country? And the truth is, that message may resonate. Voters in swing districts care about healthcare, the cost of living, democracy, and stability. Many of them see Trump as unpredictable, chaotic, and overwhelming. Republicans tied too closely to him risk losing these voters. But Republicans who distance themselves risk backlash from the MAGA base. It's a no-win situation, the kind that tears parties apart. This leads to the question simmering inside conservative circles for months. Are we watching the early stages of a Republican civil war? Moderates are exhausted. Establishment conservatives are uneasy. MAGA loyalists want purity. Strategists want electability. And Trump wants complete control. These goals are fundamentally incompatible. And as each faction pulls in a different direction, the foundation begins to crack. Nearly 30 Republicans have already broken ranks. That number isn't random. It represents a measurable shift, a signal that lawmakers are recalibrating their political futures. Some are running from Trump, others are running toward him, but almost nobody is standing still. There's one more layer to this story, one that could define the next decade of American politics. For years, Trump's grip on the GOP has been treated as unbreakable. But political power doesn't evaporate in one dramatic moment. It erodes quietly. It dissolves from within. It weakens when people stop fearing the consequences of disloyalty. And right now, Republicans are testing the boundaries. They're realizing they can disagree with Trump and still survive. That realization is dangerous for Trump, because once independence becomes normalized, loyalty becomes optional. And optional loyalty is the one thing Trump cannot control. By the time we reach the 2026 midterms, this fracture could become a full-scale political earthquake. If Republicans continue breaking away, Trump may enter the next election cycle weaker than he's been since 2015. If they return to him, the party may become more MAGA-aligned than ever. But the most likely scenario is the messiest one, a divided GOP battling itself while Democrats capitalize on the chaos. A civil war doesn't start with shouting. It starts with defections, doubts, and quiet decisions behind closed doors. And all of that is already happening. So as we watch nearly 30 Republicans step away from Trump, as strategists warn of losing the Senate, as House members threaten to block his agenda, and as senators openly limit his military power, one thing becomes clear. Trump's grip on the party isn't tightening, it's slipping. And if Republicans keep choosing survival over loyalty, we might be witnessing the beginning of the end of Trump's dominance inside the GOP. The next 2 years will be brutal. The fights will get louder, the fractures will widen, and by the time 2026 arrives, the Republican Party may look nothing like the one Trump once commanded. If you want to keep up with the battles, the defections, and the behind-the-scenes chaos shaping the future of American politics, make sure you subscribe, hit the like button, and stay tuned, because this story is only getting started.